Welcome to Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. A world where coming in second place is not an option, but where principle-centered winning is the only approach.
Good morning and welcome to this week's edition of Government Contracting Weekly. We have two outstanding executives joining us today who not only demonstrate great leadership, but also reflect on the very real need to stay current, particularly in these challenging times. Our first guest this morning is Susan Zeleniak, Senior Vice President of Public Sector Markets for Verizon Federal. And after Susan, we will be hearing from Kevin Madden, the Vice President and General Manager for Honeywell. Now let's meet Susan Zeleniak. Welcome to our segment where we have with us an expert this morning. And this morning we have with us Susan Zeleniak from Verizon. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here
You're
today.
very welcome, Susan. Susan is Senior Vice President with Verizon's public sector and actually is responsible for over $4 billion in revenue. And she was actually, many years ago, the first person ever to head up the communications in the House of Representatives. So she has an extensive background. But Susan, would you tell our audience a little bit more about all that you've been doing?
Sure, thank you very much. I've now become one of the ancients in the industry whenever I think as far back as my experience takes me.
You think that, the audience probably doesn't think that, but...
Well, the funny part is I came into this, people always say, how did you start doing this? And I started as a waitress in a restaurant, waiting on a table of telephone company executives, and one day one of them said to me, you really ought to do something better than this. And I went to work for C&P Telephone.
That's like a movie where the audience gets up and walks out and says, that's unbelievable. That doesn't
it's
really
exactly
ever
what
happen.
happened.
Yes.
It's exactly what happened. And that C&P became Bell Atlantic, and one of my
With the breakup of all the bells.
Exactly. And divestitures, we like to refer to it. And so at that point I was working for Bell Atlantic. The House of Representatives was one of my customers. And so they offered me a job. And so I went and became the first director of telecommunications for the House of Representatives. Did a couple of jobs there, but interacted very closely with member offices and their staffs. It was a great job.
So it's planned serendipity, really.
It really was. Yes. I loved it, and I love the whole political environment, so it just fed me in every way.
Yes.
Absolutely. So then I went to work for MCI, which was acquired by Verizon. And by the way, Verizon used to be Bell Atlantic, so I've come back to where I started.
So all the way around.
All the way around. So it's been a great opportunity everywhere I've been to really interact with the government and really to see how the government is using technology to change.
Perfect.
It's been a great experience.
We're here with Susan Zeleniak. And Susan, the Verizon public sector, the enterprise solutions that you're heading up, tell us what you're doing there. What is the center doing?
Okay, so Enterprise Solutions is all about bringing together all of the assets of Verizon to support our very large customers, both in government and commercial. So what we did was to join our wireless assets, our wireline assets, and our Terramark assets into a single entity that can work with customers directly to put solutions together. And we did that because everything now really goes together. The world is going mobile, and so people want to be able to interact their mobile network with their network in the office, and they want to be able to store their data somewhere and access it from anywhere in the cloud. Exactly. So that's really, we looked at that and said, wait, we've got all these parts. Let's be able to go to the customer as a single business unit and not as these entities.
So it's integrated. So our customers, it's seamless. Integration was the main driver for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then what about moving forward? Where do you see those technologies moving in the future? More mobility, obviously.
Mobility is driving everything, and secure mobility is going to be the key. So we really see the world in three parts: mobility, cloud, and security, and they all go together. And so that's really where our focus is.
And you want to be able to offer sort of an end-to-end solution to all your customers, state, local government, and commercial.
I want to be able to offer those kinds of solutions, and I think it's what customers are now looking for as well.
And actually, they don't expect any less nowadays.
No, they don't. They don't. And the parts are so intermingled, it's very hard to buy them individually and really get to an end solution that you can count on for reliability.
So you're in the forefront of that integration.
We'd like to think so.
Yeah. So Susan, integration is a big issue, but really the end user just wants to have speed, reliability. The audience knows we're always talking a lot about mobility. We're talking about the cloud. What is the future in terms of challenges for Verizon? What is the government challenge with, and also what are government contractors that may be watching today challenge with that Verizon can say, no, we have that solution for you?
Right. So I think, government is challenged by the same things challenging any big enterprise. The technology is changing quickly. The workforce is aging, and we need to make sure that we have a workforce that can take on these kinds of challenges. Budgets are going down. There's less capital to invest, less upfront money to invest in some of these solutions, which, by the way, come and go so quickly that it's very difficult to plan your budget for them. And I think the fact that the requirements, or that the technology changes so fast, it sets an expectation by the end user that if it's available, I should have it.
Right.
And so I remember one time hearing that if whatever your last best customer experience was, is your expectation of your next customer experience.
It keeps raising the bar consistently.
Absolutely. So it doesn't matter that one might have been a hotel and one is a department store. You now have an expectation of what good service is. So if citizens are seeing technology improving the service they get from commercial enterprises, that citizen expects the government to be able to deliver that same thing.
Or else it just makes the government look archaic, even when it's not.
Absolutely, and the challenge for the government is often the budget cycle. So I was going to say that's one of the big issues for government, and the big challenges is that while cloud has been out there a couple years, we're now sort of just starting to see the procurements for cloud come about because the budget cycles have caught up to the technology.
And of course we saw that a lot last year with all the issues that we were facing at the end of the year.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So we think budget is a big driver in some of the ways technology will be deployed.
And what about for the government contractors that are watching today? What about the solutions that you have for them?
So we tend to work with a lot of government contractors depending on an opportunity. We might see a great opportunity for a mobility solution, meaning, let's say you have a solution you take on a tablet so that a government worker who's out in the field doing the job can actually complete the work on the tablet, not having to go back to an office. A lot of those applications are being developed by partners that we're working with. So while we have the basic infrastructure, we have the tablet, we have the network, we have the cloud to store the data, what we're really working with a lot of contractors on is that application to actually put the whole solution together.
So it's flexible, it's mobile, because that's what they're expecting. Nothing
Solutions
less.
have to be mobile now.
Yes.
Have to be mobile.
Everybody wants to be everywhere, all of the time. And that's
Exactly.
never going to change, and we're not going back.
We're not going back, for sure.
No. So what are you doing to address government contractor security issues and the government security issues?
So the way we look at security now is it has to be part of everything we do. There's no you no longer say, here's your solution, now let me talk to you about security. It has to be embedded in the solution in all parts. So whether it's in your network, whether it's in your cloud, whether it's in your application, it's really important that security is embedded in the solution, not, as we like to, not bolted on, but embedded. And so, and you've got to be able to prove that to the government.
Susan, our viewers know that we've talked about quite a few times the bridging the chasm between government and industry. This is an issue that's been contentious for many years, and we've had some guests on that have said that they feel that the chasm is closing, others that think that it isn't. What's your view on the chasm, and can you think of specific examples as to how the chasm has either broadened or narrowed?
So I've been doing this a long time. And I go back to my experience with the government and the way we bought things then and the way that some of the procurement activity we're seeing. One of the things I definitely see where I would say the chasm is closing is there's a lot more interaction before a major procurement hits the street.
Dialogue, communication we hear.
Right, that even allowing companies to come in and do presentations about how they think it should work. GSA, for example, thinking about the next networks contract had vendors in, and not just the current vendors, but others come in and talk about how that contract might look in its next transformation.
So it's the shaping, not the government doing it independently, but more collaboratively.
Absolutely, and we've seen that in that's one example, but we've seen it in many cases. And I think especially as they're looking to buy new services like cloud, they really are very interested and have allowed vendors to have good open dialogue prior to the release of any procurement.
So they're really
vehicles.
Recognizing also they don't have all the resident expertise. They need technology from industry, technology from our contractors that watch the show.
Absolutely, absolutely. And in fact, the government, I think, has been very open to that kind of consulting for people who can bring them in good ideas. So I think in that regard. I think the challenge for the government is we're never short of protests on awards, especially in new areas. And so that, the government also has to be very careful about protecting the integrity of the procurement. I think in commercial procurement, there tends to be more dialogue during the procurement. In government procurement, once the RFP is on the street, communication pretty much stops.
And actually communication is prohibitive a lot of the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so sometimes, I think I understand why, but I think sometimes, it does inhibit some of the solutions maybe being better than what the government gets otherwise.
And we hear from the government contracting industry, they get frustrated by that.
Right.
It feels negative, and that's not what you do on the commercial sector,
right.
in the commercial side. So you feel that it's just abnormal almost.
Right. So I understand it, but it does make it difficult. And then, of course, contracting officers fear the protest. And so, they're trying to treat everybody equally, and that's one of the reasons why I think they like to put out specifications instead of outcomes.
Because then they can actually address them beforehand, up front, when the protests come in.
Absolutely.
Because the outcomes you don't know until the contract's really been in place for years.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And bid processes are increasing. We've actually had on Seth Berensweig, who said that bid protests were escalating and there's going to be an avalanche this year.
No, we have seen it as well. We've been surprised by I track that as well, and I'm really surprised by the number of
the volume
of protests we're seeing. It almost seems
it's de rigueur now.
Well, I'm going to tell you this. Used to be that whenever you got a call from a contracting officer that you had an award, everybody went out and had a party. Now you have to wait till the protest period.
Yes.
Because you almost automatically expect it.
Right. Yeah. Which is not a good environment.
Which is not a good environment. So, but that's why I say I think government contracting has a lot of challenges, and I don't want to diminish those in my saying what I'd like to see or what I see as the vision for the future of buying. But we have to get over those hurdles. We have to be willing to take the jumps and try to do it and do outcome-based procurements.
This program focuses always on the keys to winning. Key Solutions focuses on how to help government contractors win. And we'd like to ask you your perspective, and our audience always likes to know, how do you win contracts, and what are some of the examples of some of your best wins and why?
Okay, so keys to winning is my job, so this is a good question.
Yes.
So I would tell the audience exactly what I tell the folks who come to work in my organization about what it's going to take to win. And the first one is, you just have to work really hard. I mean, you have to literally be on it all the time, every day, working hard, following what's happening in the government, following what's happening in your company. I mean, you just have to really work hard. I don't care how smart you are or how great a product, there's no substitute. But secondly, and maybe more specifically, you really need to, in this day where there's so much competition and things are moving so fastly, being able to state the benefits of what you do to the government. Not how great your product is.
Not selling your company and selling your services. What matters to them?
What matters to them. And the way I define this in our business is, what's your elevator pitch? If you were to get into the elevator with the CIO of one of the agencies downtown and you had to the 10th
floor.
Never,
ever tell him what you do. Ask what he needs, what he's doing, because then you can answer it correctly.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
But it's more, you just have to be able to state the benefit. And so, and I will tell you,
not about your firm.
And if you're coming to Verizon because you'd like to perhaps work with us, I need to hear the same thing. What's the benefit to the government? So to me, that's a really big one. And then the other thing is, make sure there's money for what it is you want to do. So it's very important to follow the budget process and the budget cycle. If 2 years ago you thought you were going to be, selling cloud everywhere, no, there was no money for cloud 2 years ago. Right. Now the money is starting to show up for cloud. So, if you have something you want to sell, make sure you're following the budget cycle. And if you don't know how to do that, there are a lot of firms out there that can help you do that, can help you see where is the money. And you want to make sure that you're going after the business in the agencies that have money for what you want to sell.
Right. So
to me, those are the 3 keys to success.
Thank you. So Susan's really saying, less selling is more selling. They don't want to hear about you and what you do. They want to hear about your benefits and what you can deliver to them only. That's all they care about.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
Don't we all?
Yes, absolutely. Everybody does. Thank you, Susan. And thank you very much for joining us this morning.
Hillary, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed it.
Good. Thank you. While Susan is a highly respected and experienced leader, it is refreshing to see how much energy and passion she brings to her job. The same actually can be said for Kevin Madden of Honeywell. Let's meet Kevin. Good Good morning and welcome back to our segment where we have with us an expert. This morning we have with us Kevin Madden. Good morning, Kevin.
Good morning.
Glad to have you with us. Kevin is with Honeywell. He's the general manager and head of their federal sales. And Kevin, could you share with our audience a little bit about your background? You've been with Honeywell, I know, for many, many years.
Yes.
One of those loyal types. So share with our audience.
I've been with Honeywell for 28 years, and currently my role is I'm the vice president and general manager, and I run the Honeywell Federal Systems Group based here out of the Washington, D.C., Maryland area.
And I know Kevin is probably too modest to share this himself, but you won a very prestigious award that is given internally at Honeywell, the Lund Award. Can you tell our audience about that award?
The Lund Award is an award that is one of the top awards for people developers within the organization. So I was nominated by my employees, and in turn was graceful enough to be selected by the organization. So great achievement, but it's because the people inspire me.
And I actually, looking at it, it looks like it's one of those, I would call it an extreme 360, because it's a 360 by multiple employees that they gave it to you. So that's really very prestigious, I think.
Yes,
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, not just on a whim of one person, but the vote of many, I would
Yes.
say, yes. Tell us a little bit about some of the challenges you faced. What is some of the greatest things you faced in those 28 years?
Oh, I'll tell you, just number one, adversity in terms of just constant change. So in terms of, continually moving, in essence, to keep yourself fresh. So that's one of the constant challenges I see in the marketplace.
For you, for the company, and for your employees?
I'd say for myself, number one, personally, in terms of staying up with the times. Secondly, for our organization to stay closest to our customers.
And what would you advise members of our audience today? How do you stay up with the times? How do you stay current?
Well, a lot of different ways, but number one, you always stay in front of your customers.
Mm-hmm.
Understanding their requirements, understanding how we drive value, and what their needs are. And I think, especially in today's environment, is really critical that you stay closest to your customers.
So you're not guessing, you're actually asking them, you're meeting with them, you're talking with them, you're in dialogue.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yes. Understanding all their technical drivers, the financial drivers, contractual drivers, whatever is out there, but really staying in front of your customers, especially in this complex environment we live in today. There's multiple decision makers. So you really have to make sure you stay in tune with your customers.
Great. Kevin, what is Honeywell doing to reduce indirect rates structures?
Well, in the environment we're in, it's always something you look at. How do we do more with less? Yes. And how do we provide more value for our customers with less?
And be more efficient throughout
absolutely,
the process.
More productive, more efficient as we move forward. So, my perspective is not all action's good action. And Honeywell is highly functionalized. I just came from a functional role in terms of running the worldwide sales organization.
Out of Minnesota?
Out of Minnesota for the past 10 years, and watched tremendous growth with that business. However, one of my key sayings with my people is if you're not tagged to a customer, or you're not tagged to things that are moving the business forward, then you tend to get yourself in trouble.
Yes.
So you really have to keep yourself fresh, current, and driving with the customers and helping facilitate what their needs are and how we meet their needs.
And have you been able to bring indirect rates down?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. What are some of the other tactics you've used in that?
Again, more directly attributable.
Yes.
Again, driving customer behavior. And helping provide solutions that are 1 degree above our competition, which creates that competitive advantage.
And when you mentioned sort of more accountable, is that within each individual account looking very closely at all those costs associated?
Absolutely, within each function.
Yes.
Looking at how do we make ourselves better as an organization, and how do we make our customers better?
Customers better. And a lot of companies of your side tend to get siloed. Like they'll have a lot of costs in one silo and another one, and they're actually duplicating them. Have you looked across those verticals as well?
Absolutely. That's leadership.
Yes.
And that's the leadership to pull.
At the leadership level.
Especially at Honeywell, we spend a lot of time, we talk about one team. And in essence, one team in terms of how we move forward, one voice to the customer. So
that's unique, actually, for an organization of your size. That's good.
But I'll tell you, we keep ourselves fresh, and we have great leadership, and in turn continues to drive our behaviors to really provide those solutions for our customers. But we're best when we act as one team.
There are times in these economic times, tough times, that some companies actually increase the number of proposals that they submit. Other companies decide, no, we're going to focus, we're going to be sharper, we're going to be tighter. What's Honeywell's approach?
I think the natural instinct is to kind of expand the net.
Do more. Like it's a numbers game. Life is a numbers game.
It's a numbers game. But I'll tell you, the best in class, what I see in the marketplace is the focus. Teams that are focused on their strengths in terms of how do they create that degree of separation and beat the competition, and in turn provide value for the customers. But again, the natural instinct is you want to do more.
Yes.
When times are down. But again, where I've seen the most success is where you focus, align the teams based on our strengths, and execute and win.
Is that what you're doing? You're directing your team to be more
Absolutely.
focused?
Absolutely.
Yes. And when Honeywell looks at the marketplace, where do you say, like, this is our focus, we're going to own and dominate in this space?
Well, that's a good question, Hillary. I think when we look at that, we go through our strategic planning process.
Yes.
And we do a lot of validation with our customers, in essence, on what's going on out there. Where's the money moving? So what agencies are hot from a standpoint?
From what you provide and your unique
and are we aligned
niche?
relative to our value?
Perfect.
And then we align to them, and then we execute.
And what about the BD people? Are business development people more or less likely to be cut when a company's looking with austerity measures to be more efficient?
I think right now, especially in this environment, you want them.
You want, yes.
You want these guys to find where the money's moved, where the needs are in the organization, and how we can align our strengths to meet those needs.
But they're only the best BD people.
Only the
There's
best.
no room now for any weak link.
A lot of what you get sometimes is, from a BD perspective, is talking about what we don't have. And we're in an environment where we have to marry it in terms of what the customer's needs are back to what we have and how we provide those services to our customers.
So they have to really understand Honeywell extremely well.
Extremely well. But they also, the best BD players in our space work on behalf of the customer. They understand the customer's need better than the customers understand themselves.
That's phenomenal.
And then they bring it back into Honeywell.
So would you say your 28 years at Honeywell is unusual, or is that usual? What about your BD team?
Well, from my perspective, I would say in our group, in HBS, the core Honeywell, it's probably normal.
It is.
So I was just on the phone this morning with one of my mentors. So I mentor, he's 33 years with Honeywell. And the best thing about this individual, what he's taught me is, even after 33 years, his mind's always on results. How do I put points on the board?
Being, like you mentioned earlier, newer, fresh, current.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I would think that your BD people are actually unique in the marketplace, because a lot of BD people tend to jump around. And this way they know your offerings and they have a greater depth. They can probably be more effective.
Our BD leaders are 30 years with the company, 25 years with the company.
Very unique.
Yes.
Yeah, special. LPTA, Kevin, and for our audience, those are sort of the dreaded words, the dreaded lowest price technically acceptable. And I think there are some companies that have not only lamented the impact that's been on the marketplace, but as sort of the feeling is that that's not the way anybody buys in the commercial sector. It's not the way that we buy anything that we have. And yet there are some companies that have adjusted well. Tell me about what you're doing at Honeywell. Are you looking at LPTA as something bad, something good? What's your approach?
Absolutely. You have to embrace change. And again, get back to the competitive environment we're in. We refer to it internally as LTIC, okay, lowest total installed cost. So it challenges us to be better, to meet our customer needs. So we really get after it. We get our presence in the facility through our products and offerings, but we get it at the lowest total installed cost. And then once you do that, then you have the opportunity to go back to your customer and really drive what their needs are, what their solutions are, understand their requirements, and get commitment to move forward in a different fashion, to upsell, possibly.
Yes, and I would think that the government's liking that, because they're saying Honeywell's listening to us and doing what we want.
Absolutely. You have to listen, you have to adapt and be competitive.
So you're saying this is a new environment, this is de rigueur, we will adapt and move with it and not sit around complaining.
Embrace it.
Yeah, embrace change, yes, healthy.
Absolutely.
And what about all of your employees? Have they jumped on board? Do you find you need a lot of leadership to get them there, or are they all the sort of same mindset as you?
Mindset, they're hungry. They play hungry.
Yes.
And when they play hungry, we win. And so no complacency.
No. And then where do you see LPTA going this year? And with austerity, people say LPTA is here to stay. In fact, we shouldn't even be talking about it that much more, because it's just going to be de rigueur.
It's part of the fabric in terms of how business is conducted.
Yes.
So,
and it's not going to go back?
No.
No. So leadership qualities are something that are so important, particularly in this tough economic milieu. And I'd like to ask you, Kevin, because having run the Lund Award like a lot of people haven't, obviously your people believe you're a good leader. You wouldn't have been voted and supported the way you are. So I think your perspective on what makes a good leader in these times versus the last 28 years you've been with Honeywell, how has leadership changed? So what is most important today in a leader versus maybe a decade ago?
I don't think a lot has changed in terms of the core leadership side, but I think it's a matter of balance. And so when I look at leadership, you look through certain things. It can't be a flash in the pan. It can't be a one-hit wonder. It can't be tagged to one particular area. I look for balance. I look for balance in faith. I look for balance in family. Mm-hmm. I believe very strongly that if you're upset on the family side, you can't carry.
That's Maslow's hierarchy.
You can't do a good job.
You're not functioning.
You're not functioning at all.
Yes.
And then secondly, from that standpoint, then you balance career with personal interest. You take that back, drives courage in terms of taking a stand, playing the game on the balls of your feet as opposed to playing on your heels. And then I would say I look at players who have been knocked in the dirt. Somewhere along their line, they have tasted defeat.
And they've got up again, though, importantly.
It's okay to lose, but don't ever quit. And I want to see that mentality when I look at a leader.
What was it Roosevelt talked about, being in the arena? It's he who has been in the arena.
Yeah, that's when you look at like a John Harbaugh. I love to study coaches. So John Wooden, John Harbaugh, up the street here, you love to listen to how they motivate and inspire people. And you have to adapt to the times. But again, I believe there's a core trait to leadership. And I believe it's with your faith, your family, which is number one. And then secondly, then you take that down to career interest and personal interest. Courage, and then again, get knocked down, get right back up.
And you feel that that hasn't really changed, that that's the same kind of person that's always succeeded throughout history, and you say coaches as well?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Kevin, one thing this morning that I noticed when you came in is that, you've come to Redskins country this morning, Redskins town, and I noticed the color of your shirt and tie.
Sure.
And you shared with me privately that your nephew plays for the Ravens. So maybe our audience will now forgive you for the color of your shirt and tie, but that's interesting to have a nephew playing for the Ravens.
Sure.
Yeah?
A lot of fun. It's my sister's little boy, and he does a nice job for him. And it's been an exciting year. So they have their challenges right now, but I'll tell you what, you like the way they're led. You like the resilience in these guys. It's eyes forward, and they're marching into the playoffs for the 5th straight year. So a lot of fun.
Which is huge. And you mentioned earlier, we were talking about leadership, and you mentioned earlier about coaches, and you look at a lot of coaches, and we talked about empathy, how important that is, particularly in these economic times. In tough times like now, what are the differences you're seeing in terms of coaches, but also in terms of your firm, Honeywell?
I'll tell you what, whether you're in Honeywell or whether you're anywhere around the world, you see it in people's eyes right now. You see the strain, you see the stress. And you have got to be, as a leader, you have got to be in touch with your people. You have to understand what drives them in their hearts. You got to understand what's going on in their families and how you can help them and make them better, in essence, a better employee, someone that helps you win and provide value for our customers. But as a leader, you have to be in touch. And I think that's one of the great things with the Federal Systems Group, with Honeywell. We not only understand our own people, we understand our customers and the challenges they're going through. But you got to bring empathy to the forefront.
And actually, I can tell the way you talk about your people. I can see it in your eyes too that you really care. And I think from our audience, we can really tell how you've won that Lund Award. I mean, 360, sitting here, I can see that your people really matter to you, Kevin.
They do.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for joining us, and it was a pleasure having with you, and I hope that this morning our audience can see some of the things that they should be doing in terms of leadership.
You bet. Thank you.
I hope you found today's program beneficial. Both Susan Zeleniak and Kevin Madden are outstanding examples of today's breed of visionary leaders. They both gave us some useful advice about leading businesses, particularly during these challenging times. Here's one more piece of advice. Please join us again next week.
You've been watching Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored each week by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. For additional information, comments, questions, or suggestions, please write us at governmentcontractingweekly.com.